Wondering how you can become better at running your business? Entrepreneurship can be stressful. There's too much to do and not enough time. If you're isolated in your daily decisions, have no fear. Success and balance are possible. Welcome to the Small Business Answer Man podcast, where you master the art of running a successful business using practical advice from experts who want to help you succeed. Now, here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome. As we're rolling right through third quarter, I'm trying to give you different things to think about. And you all have heard me say many times in this opening that have been really concentrating on this 6P business owner formula that I've created, that I've been sharing with audiences, and I'm doing some writing on it. And probably a book's going to come out of it. And that's why I love bringing different people with different perspectives of it, because we talk about people. We talk about promotion, we talk about pricing, and today we're going to get in some of that pricing with our guest today because it's all about sales, but it's also about productivity, profit, and processes. So what I want to share with you is how can you incorporate those in your business? And one of those key factors is we see the economy slowing a little bit and some challenges that's coming in there is what can we do to increase our sales, which ultimately increases our bottom line profits. And there's still time to make changes this year, and it's even going to make a bigger impact for you next year. So today's guest with us is Lisa. Lisa, would you share with them what problem will you help solve for our listeners today?
Well, I think many times, thanks for having me, by the way, many times businesses really want to offset sales. They want to either hire a business person or they want to partner with somebody to do sales for them because they find they're getting overwhelmed and they can't work on the business. And so they want to know, what do I need to know? What time is right? And how do I pay them?
Yeah, I think that's crucial. And today we've got with us Lisa J. Smith. Lisa is the CEO of Smith Company, a sales consulting firm focused on modern mid-size B2B businesses. She understands her clients' challenges because she's been there as a COVIDpreneur. Despite the turbulent economic landscape, she reached six figures in her first year of business. Lisa, it is great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
It is great to be here, Gary. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I love this topic of sales, and I think you've hit a nail on the head. A lot of it is, when do I grow to get that salesperson? A lot of times the business owner or entrepreneur is doing it themselves, or maybe they've had one person on staff that's worked with it. So can you share with us, really, let's start from that standpoint when you're thinking about in that area and we look at our different companies that's available to us. What would you say? When do we know it is the right time?
Yeah, they say timing is everything, right? And so there's no magic bullet. There's definitely no magic bullet. Often I feel like the right time to start thinking about it is maybe the opposite of when people might think. It's when referrals have started to slump or dry up. It's if you're a very highly referral-based business. It's when you may have lost your biggest client, right? A lot of clients right now are tightening their belts and pulling back because I think the economy has slowed down. Inflation is catching finally up with us. It has slowed down. And I think, or if you just can't keep up, like if you have some opportunities and you just don't have the bandwidth to be able to pursue them, that these things might be the right time, the lever to start to say, do we look for some help? Do we train up and keep it in-house and get more efficient?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that we have with this is we may have that we want to do it, but if we've been doing it, we kind of have our process, but we really don't have a process in place. So what are some of those things you think that they need to think about, that they need to have in place to really succeed of bringing someone on board?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing to talk to somebody and get super energized about their energy. Salespeople typically have lots of energy, right? That's why they're in sales. They like people and they like selling and they like that process. But often you don't think about, because you're doing it organically. You mentioned, Gary, sometimes the owner or the leadership team is doing it, right? Because that's just naturally how the organic growth progressed. You don't think about all the things that you need. And so really, when I work with my clients on this issue, we really talk about, you need tools, to be able to track sales activity. They don't have to be expensive and super sophisticated, but you've got to have some set of tools. You have to have a documented process. What do you do from point A to point Z? Even if you write it down on a napkin, you have to start by that, because the person who's selling is going to ask, what does the sales cycle look like, right? You have to have a really succinct set of services, a list, and corresponding pricing. You want to arm them with as much information as possible, and you don't want them going rogue, selling maybe a pricing model that you haven't either tried or don't know if you can execute right. And then you need to understand and be able to clearly communicate your USP, your positioning, your unique positioning statement, your ability to have an elevator pitch so that they're really on brand. Because as they go out, if they're not going to be out with you, that you want to make sure that they're really on brand. And most salespeople are great. They're very smart. They can do all this. And then really you want to have, again, this idea of organized roles and responsibilities. When do they bring you in? Who do they talk to when they have an issue? If they're having a roadblock, what happens then? And it really takes a little bit to sit down and put all these things in place. But the last thing you want to do is hire somebody to do sales for you or business development without these tools, because what you're going to end up doing is paying them to create these for you. And that's the opposite of your goal.
Yeah, that becomes so crucial, because the challenge is I do extended disc. So the disc model, a lot of times when we hire salespeople, like you said, they have energy, they're influencers, they're the I style on the disc model.
Yes, correct.
And one of the things that probably is not in their greatest strength is organization. Actually, they say normally they're very disorganized. But if you have the systems and processes that you've talked about and the documenting, and the big key is if they generating leads, you want to have, so you have that down the road. Hopefully that salesperson with you a long, long time. But the only thing is, we do know some people don't make it. But the only thing is, if they've been with you 6 or 12 months, you don't want to lose what they have created and what they've started cultivating, and you have no clue who they called on. And that becomes in some of those processes and where they track that information and be able to put it in. So I guess when you look at it and stuff, and you talk about different areas, you kind of talk about in one area is how you can be on offense. It takes being on offense as well as defensive strategies to kind of win at sales. Right. Can you share with us what you mean by that?
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm thinking of I like analogies because they're easy to understand, and I love sports. So I'm a football gal. I'm going to talk football, right? It takes both offense and defense to win a game. You can't win with one or the other. Yes, there's some outstanding players out there who might be able to carry a game, but really, if you're looking at it, it takes both. And so from a business to business sales perspective, across that funnel, I think of offensive as being the things that you do when you are proactive and you are acquiring clients, right? So there's a whole bunch of activities you do when you're trying to acquire new clients. It's that lead generation that you talked about. It's marketing. It's engaging valuable content, maybe putting content out, on the internet like this, great content like podcasts, or the things like that. The things that you're going to be proactive and the things that you're control. But where we spend less time once we sign that deal is on the defense, which is really holding the line, keeping those organizations happy, understanding how to measure client satisfaction, creating good retention programs, creating referral programs. 80% of revenue for B2B is coming from your existing book of business. So it doesn't make sense for us to not spend time and money investing there on defense as opposed to offense. But offense gets all the play, right? They get all the PR, right? The quarterback is the one who's out there having the press release, right? Might be doing an ad campaign, but it's really about retention. And so without that balance, you're not going to be able to really grow and hit the revenue goals that you're going to want to over time.
Yeah, that becomes so critical, because I think so many times, yes, we want to get the sales, but we forget there's the back end that if you're not covering that, what's setting you apart? What's making you different? Right. What are the small little things that sets your company apart that really makes you stand out? And I think it can be small little things. And even with the salesperson can help with that, but it becomes crucial the back end that you have that covered. Because if you get someone out there and they start selling, the last thing they're going to want is that they become a one-time client. Because any
Right.
good salespeople, they want referrals, and they work for that referrals because they know it's hard to get a brand new one. But man, if they can make them a recurring client, and it's no different. Why do we have so many subscription services now?
Right.
Companies have figured out referrals, and this recurring is key to make a successful business, and it makes it easier, especially when we're looking at times that we are now. Is you've got to find how can you cultivate those continued clients. And one I would say on that is probably on the defensive side, you could go back and look at your database, if you have that database, and who's not done business with you this last year. And if you're one of those businesses that come every 2 or 3 years, go back to some of those people and have them call on those clients, because that may be opportunity to be able to gain some of that business back.
Well, absolutely. And it costs much less to continue a relationship or renew a relationship, to your point, if they haven't been with you for a year or two, than to go acquire a new one. We've seen all the data on that. So yes, absolutely. And on the defense, you want to keep your competitors at bay. So when you have really great relationships, because B2B is about relationship building, and you have really great relationships and they're satisfied and happy, it doesn't matter who comes a calling and who comes knocking on their door. They know that they're going to be working with you.
Yeah. And I think another area that's so crucial, and I know you and I talked a little bit offline, was talking about this, is how we can shift our thinking, because sometimes when things slow down, we think, okay, we've got to be the lowest price. And I like what you talk about. It really is about value. What value are you creating for your client, and how are you selling your value to your clients?
Right. Not enough people. First of all, everyone undervalues their services in B2B. And we've inherited all these really sort of hourly, antiquated models that I think it really would behoove us to step back and kind of take a look at, are those really working? But even if you're not continuing on an hourly basis to provide, that's kind of a cost. What does it cost me to do the work with you? Versus, to your point, what is the value that I'm delivering? And then, for example, some industries, in some creative industries like agency, digital agency, creative agency, they actually have a model, a value-based model, that is, can we get compensated not only for the solutions that we bring, but also the value we create for you? And that's not always sales. So they're actually getting compensated not only for their work, but the value they create. So it's a really interesting idea to step back and say, what are we really doing? If we have a very innovative process, or if we can solve a problem in a unique way, or a faster way, or a more efficient way, is there a way that we can then think about our pricing differently? Because the client is going to gain that when they work with us, as opposed to, are we truly in a commodity, right? So if you're in an industry, like for example, if you work with the government a lot, or you're in an industry, where they're setting prices, it's much more difficult to do this. But if you're not, there is a lot of room. And because there is so much noise and competition, people who really lead with value, why they are in business, not the how and the what, but why. Why should you work with us? You can then garnish higher prices. But it's scary, because you think you're going to turn people away, and you think you're going to risk losing clients, but it actually works in the opposite. It's a total mindset shift.
Yeah, it becomes so critical, because pricing, I mean, there's always going to be the next person that's willing to do it for less.
Of course.
And you just fall into that trap. And if you fall in that trap, ultimately, long-term success for your business is not very good. Or
No.
you're going to have to always fight to be able to get any profit out of your business that we've talked about and stuff. So what's some of them ways we want to think differently on that? You talk about 5 simple steps to kind of really reframe that sales process that you have. What's some things that we need to be thinking in that area of reframing our sales process?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is, you mentioned this, going back and looking at data. So we're in a data-rich environment, right? And again, it doesn't matter how sophisticated the tools are that you have. You have a lot of information about your current clients and maybe previous clients that you should go back and analyze that data. How profitable was that industry? Should we continue to do that, for example, right? Should we continue to pursue this type of market segment? How profitable was it? Did we make money? Were we successful? Did we meet their obligations? Use data to garnish insights to be proactive about how you approach sales, as opposed to tracking. It's important to track sales and revenue, but those are lagging indicators, right? It's important to also have leading indicators so that when things change, because the market is volatile right now, you mentioned there's time. We're only in the middle of the year, right? There's time to make some changes and still meet revenue goals, even if you're not on track right now. So I think leveraging data is super important. I think in addition to that, I think it's really important to take a step back, and I mentioned team, right? Like really understand who is involved in sales. Maybe you have too many, or maybe you do not have enough people in sales. So sometimes simplifying it is adding more and lightening the load so that one person isn't carrying all the weight. Sometimes it's about, no, I think we really only need one person to own this, so it's extremely effective and efficient. So looking at the team and kind of understanding that. Sometimes people rely a little too heavily on tools and automation. So the third thing I'd like to talk about is that, listen, automation is really important. And it can really help us when it's used in the right way. But we can't rely on automation, because the fourth thing is, which kind of relates, is people are really great at kind of the introduction. And then they always say, oh yeah, but I'm really bad at follow-up. Right. So really getting honed in on follow-up and following up, often. And automation can help you with that, but it can't replace follow-up, because people want to do business with people. And if you lose that touch, and that relationship and building trust, especially in B2B, because you're relying on automation, you're going to lose that potential client. Right. So, and the other thing I hear a lot with follow-up is, I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be, I don't want to be aggressive. Well, the reality is there is a tone that you can take that's not aggressive. And we are so overwhelmed with tasks and information that, quite frankly, you are not top of mind. Until you've landed that client, you're not top of mind, right? Like, yes, they're thinking about that problem, but they're also, your prospects are thinking about 1,000 other things. So you need to think about follow-up as really just a reminder. Are you still, do you still have this challenge, right? Or, so you can time it in a way that doesn't feel aggressive, but you keep top of mind awareness. And I think that the fifth thing, lastly, is really understanding your messaging and your why. I mentioned this earlier, right? We get caught up. I like to use an analogy. Michelin tires used to run an ad, and it was in a magazine, and it was a white, basically background with a baby in the middle of a tire. And the question is, what are they selling, right? They're not selling the type of rubber and the tread and how much water it's going to wick away. They are emotionally, working with that ad to say, your family's safety is riding on our tires, right? That was the why. We feel our tires are better and far superior because they're safer, and they imply all of that within that ad. And I think we get caught up in the how we deliver our services and the what are they and defining what they are. And we lose the fact that, sales is really about psychology and emotion and storytelling. And even if you are in the most complex industry, like environmental engineering, for example, you can still tell stories that can connect with a human who is purchasing your services to help solve their problem. So I really like reinforcing the why.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's some great information to think about, is how you're putting your messaging out there. Follow up, to me, I've heard before, a person I followed and stuff said follow up is the kind of the $50,000 key, for salespeople, but also for companies. How can you continue to follow up? Because if you don't, then, like you said, you're not top of mind like you think you are. They've got 1,000 other things that they're thinking themselves. So that follow-up, it doesn't have to be pushy at all. It's about keeping in touch with them and really finding out how you can help solve their problems. I think it's kind of interesting. I'm going to kind of shift from the kind of what to look at there, but to really think about like with salespeople. So if they're trying to look for that person, because I said a lot of times it will come as eyes. And one thing you have to realize is when you're interviewing for this type of position, they're salespeople. So
Right.
they normally can convince you, if they can't, to buy something, they normally can do that. But you kind of share a process that's kind of interesting. And I think this is true, and I see it too, is why introverts make the best salespeople.
Oh, this is great. I love talking about this, Gary. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you mentioned that you use DISC. I've done that as well, right? And that you can, it's just a tool, obviously, to understand personalities. But there are 3 or 4 things that make introverts really great salespeople that are really important. And I'm not discounting an extrovert. I'm extroverted, right? It's really just, I really think these terms, introvert and extrovert, are how you recharge. It's less about necessarily personality, but how you recharge. Extroverts like to charge with people, and introverts like to charge on their own. And because of that, they develop interesting skills. It's not that they have to be antisocial, but they are very good listeners. They really, because they don't assume that they're going to control the conversation, right? Which extroverts like to kind of pop out there first. They're very good listeners. So they, and because they're good listeners, they also ask, secondly, great questions. So they'll ask really good open-ended questions, which is really important in B2B sales, to learn all of the, really get down into the layers of the onion about what the problem is that they're trying to solve. And then they're listening for those key things. And because they're not talking, they get so much more intel from that individual, and that individual is actually, they're building more trust and rapport, because we like to talk about ourselves. So the more we feel seen and heard and listened to, the more we go from our reptile brain into like that front cortex, and we're like, okay, so we're not fight or flight. This person is really great, and they're listening to me, and they're spending a lot of time investing in me, and I feel seen and heard. Now I can kind of go into my, less my, like I said, fight or flight, and more into like that rational brain. Like, let's like start really talking about these complex things. So great listeners, great questions, and they like to be prepared. You talked about sometimes extroverts sometimes will fly by the seat of their pants, right?
Yep.
Or maybe they're not as disciplined in a process unless a process exists for them. Introverts tend to be very process oriented, and they like to be prepared. So they're not going to show up in a conversation and wing it. They're going to know, they're going to have done their research about the prospect or the industry, right? Which only adds to that level of confidence that of the other person talking to them, like, you really know me, you understand my problems. So many, many, many talents of introverts, and that's why they're really great at sales. But here's the key. If you're going to hire somebody who is introverted, you need to give them time to recharge, because they're not going to get charged up in the sale itself. That takes energy away from them. So you need to allow them the flexibility to then not interact so they can recharge and go do it again. And that's where sometimes people fall off.
Yeah, that's so crucial, because it's the amount of energy, because it's not their comfort zone. We're an extrovert, it's their comfort zone.
Right.
We're an introvert, it's not. But when they have that, and that's where it comes back to the keys we talked about earlier, is your documented processes, your systems, having those in place, because that will drive an introvert crazy if you just bring them on and say, okay, and create this. They'll create that, but then you're not going to get them out there selling. Exactly. And it's going to create a challenge in that area. Some great information, Lisa. I really appreciate you sharing, because it's getting people to think about, what do they have to have? What do they need to do in this sales process? I know you're willing to offer a free 30-minute call, kind of to reveal some of their sales blind spots. You want to share a little bit about that, and
absolutely
where they need to go to get that?
Sure. Well, you can go right to my website, which is smithcous.com, and sign up for a free 30-minute call with me. I do what I just described. I ask a lot of questions to try to understand, where do you feel stuck, right? Sometimes what I'm listening for are sometimes less about the symptom and more about the key problem. I've spent 30 years in sales. In B2B, I've seen everything under every economic situation that you can think of. And I've turned a lot of companies around. So be aware that your problem is unique to you and your industry, but probably similar to something I've seen. So we can really start to target some of those things on the 30-minute call. And you feel like you're already getting key takeaways and results.
Yeah. And that becomes the key, because it really takes that blind spot, no different as when you're driving your car and you can't see that person next to you in the mirror. That's the challenge, is that we're so close to it that we can't see it. And it's the same thing in your vehicle. It's so close that you can't see that other person. You start to turn over and they start honking their horn at you. So there's the reason there.
You're like, whoa, didn't know it was there. And we want to reveal those. We want to reveal those, get those obstacles out of the way so that you can boost your revenue and, make more profit.
Well, Lisa, that's some great information. And I thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise with our listeners. But before I let you go, I want you to share with them your best business tip or advice you would give the business owners.
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very humbled to be part of your podcast. It's my pleasure. So as a solopreneur, I have done this myself. You wear a lot of hats as a business owner. Even if you have a team, you end up wearing a lot of hats. And it's really important at some point to start taking the hats off and really start delegating time and information and expertise to others when you can. Some of it might be budget, some of it might be time management, but it's really important to then hand those off in order for you to spend time not just working in the business, but so that it allows you to work on the business, right? So if you're doing everything, you cannot work on the business for it to grow. So I would advocate, really, with the timing is right, or even if you feel like the timing is not right, get rid of the things that you're not an expert at so that you can focus on what you really do, what you love, what you're an expert at, and it allows you to grow your business.
Yeah, I love that. And I really appreciate you sharing that information. And remember, Lisa's available at smithcous.com. She's willing to give you a 30-minute call to kind of reveal those sales blind spots you have. So check her out, check out her information, great information that she has up there. I kind of want to leave you today. I always give you an action or a challenge. Today, I want to really leave you about thinking about your sales process. And how do you do your sales? How do they come in? Do you have documented processes? Do you have systems set up? How is your services and pricing? We have went through an inflationary period. So if you not adjust pricing, you're going backwards. So do you need to make some changes there? And then what is that USP? That's your unique selling proposition. What makes you different in the marketplace? Because if you're like everyone else, you're only competing on one thing, and that's price. And it's no fun to compete on price because it's always about being the lowest. Instead, what makes you different? What makes you unique in those areas? So Lisa, again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Okay, everybody. Now, listeners, come back next week and we will cover another one of those 6P. But remember, somebody maybe another business owner, is having a challenge in this area of sales. Would you mind sharing this podcast with them? Because that will help them. And you also help us grow and really expand the podcast. Because my whole method, my reason for doing this podcast is to help business owners thrive and succeed in business. And if you do that, you're helping not only me, but you're helping that other business owner. And small business owners are the backbone of this economy. We're the ones that make it happen. The larger companies are large companies, but the small business owners have hire and have employed more employees than anyone else. So that's my plug today of sharing the podcast and getting it out there and letting people know about it. So thanks for joining us. Come back next week and we'll have another great podcast for you. Make it a great day.
That's all the time we have for this week. To continue your journey, head over to smallbusinessanswerman.biz to access the tools and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who would benefit from listening. That's smallbusinessanswerman.biz. Until next time, remember, when you find the right solutions, your business grows and you get your time back.